Hello, and welcome back to yet another Website Depot podcast. As ever, I'm your host, Greg Benevent. And once again, I'm lucky to be joined by Noel Dombroski. Noel, how you doing there?
I'm doing pretty great, Greg. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well myself. I'm wearing my. I always see in this thing it says "Don't give up," but you have to see it's "Don't give up the ship." Like it's not just "Don't give up," because too often I sit here and people be like, "Wow, that's inspirational." I'm like, "Yes, but it's also about a specific thing." And I always feel I have to address that because my posture's so bad. But yes, and speaking of that same, well, not the exact same topic, but a similar idea, adjustments and improvements. And that's what you're coming to talk to us about today, Noel, ways some people can improve the things that they're doing for their small business in terms of video and a whole lot else. If you could tell us more about that.
Absolutely. I kind of put together a list of mistakes I tend to see people make
Oh, good.
in like video marketing, and I think there's kind of like two sides of it. There's very much like the technical side, which is kind of like, let's say, I like to pretend in this perfect world, people have been listening to our podcast where we encourage
Yes.
people to go around with their phone and businesses to make their own stuff. So
Hmm.
some of the physical stuff comes from the idea maybe you've done this, you're like, this sucks. Maybe we can pinpoint why it sucks. Always are. But the first you make the first video and
Right.
you
The
work with
first
it.
thing, it's always going to be that way. Yes.
I'd say the first 20 things are all gonna sound like that. Uh, yeah, but there's definitely, I think there's things that you can mistakes you're making on a technical level, and then I think there are mistakes more on a philosophical level of why aren't people
Mm.
watching this video till it's over.
Hmm.
So I think it could be good to just start with like the technical stuff right off the bat,
Hmm.
because those are pretty basic. But I think the number one like cardinal sin I see people commit, and maybe this is because I'm a film student and I like watching things as they're traditionally, but shooting videos in vertical is a habit that we
Oh.
get into with especially since we're so used to that's it's the lazy position. You can take a video, send it to your mom, but it's also how you post on like social.
Right.
But I think if you're trying to train yourself to have that eye, um, you want to start shooting horizontal. You want to just take that extra step
Mm.
because you can do things to make it work. But I think that that's what signals to us immediately. I don't want to say amateur, but it's definitely more accessible. It is what we see constantly. So I think that there's a purpose for vertical video, Instagram stories, IGTV. That's great. But I think most platforms, Facebook video, uh, Instagram videos, on the timeline, Twitter, etc. It's good to get into a habit of shooting horizontal, because it also it just feels more professional and more cinematic.
Mm.
But you also get more of the content. So if you're shooting, let's say, a room that you just renovated, if you're going around vertical, okay, but flipping it is closer to what our eye sees, and it's just going to be more appealing to people.
Right. I mean, even I don't know if this helps buttresses your point or not, but I mean, just even as we're doing this, I have my phone in horizontal view in this moment right now, and it certainly looks infinitely better than when I've tried doing these in verticals just for something as informal and as loose as this podcast, which is a far cry from the kind of thing you're talking about for a business. So that's great advice.
I think another point is kind of what we were just talking about before we started rolling. We were looking at light. Another big mistake that I see when people shoot their own video is that they don't have enough light. They don't know
Yeah.
how to light.
Hmm.
And this is something even I get hung up on professionally because I think people like there's this idea that lighting is this big complex thing when it's really not.
Hmm.
And to your point, the biggest thing is, can I see both of your eyes? Can I see the whites of your eyes? If you're looking at
Hmm.
your, whoever
Hmm.
you're shooting with, um, and you can't see like the whites of their eyes, who are we going to connect with? Um,
Right.
this is
Right.
also if you're shooting at home, if you're shooting a Zoom, a Q&A, or any kind of anything. Just look at yourself and see, can I see my eyes? Do I have a clear connection with the person who's speaking? To kind of bounce off of that, I also
Hmm.
see, I think what we're doing right now, it's very casual. It's just Zoom.
Hmm.
We're talking head.
Certainly.
But if
Hmm.
you were gonna say, try to put a piece together, a story together,
Hmm.
you don't want everything to be centered. So
Oh, right.
we tend to think like, especially if you're going from taking pictures to taking video, the sometimes the instinct is everything needs to be in the middle. But once you
Right.
start putting that together, you're realizing that there's nowhere for your viewer to go. It's like one note almost.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's where things like the rule of thirds comes into play. And that's just a really fancy word for saying don't you don't always have to center your subjects. Like if you think of like an
Right.
interview, the talking heads, it's not like, somebody's sitting right in the center of the screen. Generally somebody is off to the side and you're kind of in that space with them.
Hmm. No, I mean that's great advice. I mean, I just, as you were talking, I remember thinking of that, something they always tell people when they're submitting a self tape for acting or anything like that. I mean, it's just if you don't know what to light and all that, just make sure there's no shadows on your face. That same thing. Just as long as you can do that, you're probably going to be fine. Particularly if you're doing things like you said for your business, for your, it has to look professional. It doesn't have to actually be professional. I think that's what you're saying is so true and so good. Yes.
And then I think another mistake that's often made is that people they don't think in shots, if that makes sense.
Mm, yes.
There's a massive trash truck outside. I don't know if you can hear the beeping.
A little bit, but that means the streets being cleaned or we're getting the trash. Like this is good municipal services happening.
Positive change, man.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, sorry. So, but really quick to bounce back to the lighting.
Please. Hmm.
It doesn't have to be that hard. That's the biggest thing. There's generally three kind of issues you'll find yourself running into, and once you can pinpoint those, it's easier to kind of troubleshoot them. It's either you don't have enough light, you have too much light, or your light is in the wrong place. But
Mm.
if you are looking at a shot of someone and everything else is bright and they're dark, brightness is behind them, obviously your light is not in the right place. You should be flipped around. you know it's as easy as just putting yourself in front of a window, but it's
Hmm.
all about just kind of where it is. um and but thinking in shots I think is really important too. So I don't know, like it's I'm trying to make it not, because it's not complicated, but it's almost like because like if you go to a professional film, what they do, they storyboard. Before
Hmm.
you go into a scene, and before you go shoot it, you sit and you kind of look at the shots together. What do you need to tell the story?
Hmm.
So you could do a simpler version of that for yourself. And you could either write down ideas in a list, or you can do stick figures and stuff. But it's important to think visually when you're
Right.
going into a video project.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, and that's and and just to kind of piggyback on what Noel's saying there, like I mean, it's if you're not familiar with video and it's the first time, the storyboard just means having a plan, writing down what you're going to do. This is what this is going to look like. This is what this is going to look like. I mean, these are all the same things you do before you would go to the grocery store, before you tackle any other kind of work project. You'd have a fairly detailed plan, and there's no reason not to maybe make it a little more detailed if you're not familiar with this kind of thing. I mean, you'll discover stuff as it happens, but going into it with a plan certainly beats not doing so.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tack that on and say that's a mistake I see people make all the time. That they'll prepare. And I think so many people, you think that you can wing it.
Right,
And
right.
it's, because the idea of planning can be overwhelming if you don't
Oh yeah.
feel like you don't know everything. Like even
Hmm.
me, like I'll charge into things and I'll be like on set and I'm like, I really wish I storyboarded this. But but it's true. And there's, I think I remember being in film school, everyone's like, oh, I can't draw. I don't want to, it's not about that.
Right.
I mean, I do that. I'm like, I can't draw. I don't want to do this. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. All right. Like do the
Right.
figures, because you're by pre-visualizing it,
Hmm.
you're going to freak out a little less when you have the camera in your hands.
Right. Right. It is. It is. You will come up with an idea. I mean, when you're going to, absolutely. I mean, to pick about when you're going to film, when you go to film something, even the simplest thing, stuff is going to happen that you're unprepared for. There'll be different emergencies. There'll be all these things competing with your attention. And if you don't storyboard, you're going to have to figure out exactly what the shot is with all of that stuff going on at the exact same time. And you're going to get overwhelmed. I mean, a professional would get overwhelmed dealing with that. That's why they don't let it happen that way. So you come in with a plan, at least you can have something, hey, when it all gets chaotic, when it gets crazy, you can hold on to that one thing and start from there. That is such a good point.
And
Noel.
that too is part of the planning is intention. And because I think there's technical planning, I think drawing a little comic book for yourself of what do I need to tell this story, because it's, let's say it's like, because there's a number of videos you can want to make for yourself, but let's say the example is I have a product. Hey, I actually have a client's product right here. It's a good example.
Hey.
Okay. Universal pill timer, and let's say you wanted to do a video where you talked about how it works. That's when you get to sit and draw your little comic book and figure out, what do I need to show? What do we need to visualize in order to get the point across? There are things like, how does it work on a technical level? Okay, I need a shot of the product. I need a shot, and you like basic moments in the beats. And what do I need to be able to show how this works? Do I need to show replacing the battery? And what do I want to showcase about this? Because what are you selling? What's the point? So if you go in with your intention, if you're like, I want to show how my product works, or I want to show what one of our services look like, think about your kind of beginning, middle, and end, and the story there, and how you need to convey that. And by doing those little things, like just bullet points, like I want to see, and you don't even have to start in order. You can just word vomit all the stuff that you might want to see, and match it to your intention. It's like, all right, if the philosophy of this is showing that this is a valuable product and showing that the way it works is unique, what shots do you need for that? Make your little comic book, and that way when you're framing it up and stuff, you can look back at your stick figures, and it's much easier to make new decisions when you can erase people and move them around than when you're standing around with everybody who's offered to help you. Hopefully not a ton of people in a pandemic, but
right. Oh yeah, no, and I that's so true. And just to put on top of that, I mean, it's that's what you said is that the story of it, but the story can be, here's what this is, here's how it works, thank you. And that's that's a story. It doesn't have to be the epic tale of these two fall in love with the universal pill timer, and it's what keeps them together. Like it's just a simple thing. I mean, it is a facetious example, but I mean that's to just that's a simple thing, and that's what you're going to want to do in an ad like that. It's just people are going to see what this thing is and how it works. No, that's great.
Yeah, and the more you can narrow down your intention and the story and what you're trying to show, the more effective it's going to be. Another mistake I think a lot of people make is they don't act like a human, and really, like
I know.
And we see it even in movies where you're like, that has no appeal to me, but it's like okay, all right, like Martha Stewart's a great example. A little bit of a tangent, but not really, I guess. That woman is always selling something. Like every 5 minutes, it's a new show. It's her paint line. It's her magazine. Everything. But when you tune into the Martha Stewart show, you're not doing it because she's selling a bunch of stuff. There's other valuable information as well. You just happen to be, she's slipping that in there. And and I think that's a very important principle to remember. It's kind of like, I love going back to our Van Halen podcast, but it's opening with the covers and slipping in the original. So what is the story? What is the first beat that's going to keep people from clicking away? The other thing is, the second you start to overtly try to sell somebody something, you've turned them off.
Oh yeah.
Because we have, you can have an infomercial with Billy Mays yelling at you about how good the stuff is, and
Rest
maybe
in peace.
Billy Mays, pour one out. but you're far more likely to get people to stick around if you can provide that valuable information,
Yes.
and give them a reason to connect. I think an example for the like Universal Pill Timer is a great example of, it gives people one less thing to worry about. If you're time,
Yes.
if you can time your
Hmm.
doses, if you can offer people that peace of mind, your
Hmm.
product is not, so demonstrating that product is not just about how do I reset the timer. It's about how are we giving you peace of mind. And,
Right.
um,
Right.
I think the easy way to do that is to show, you can show the problem. Like, then this
Hmm.
goes back to, planning and having your beginning, middle, and end. Is it,
Hmm.
show the problem, show the product solving the problem, happily ever after,
Hmm.
but you got to
Yes. No, it's 100%.
draw people in.
Right, and it's yeah, just all that was so true. And just to piggyback on that just a little bit, the idea of as soon as someone sells, you're trying to sell something to someone, it turns off. One of the major reasons for that is that you've now put the responsibility for this on them. Like it's no longer about you providing something, you the person being filmed. Then it's on the person watching this to provide something. So you've kind of violated that relationship a bit. And something I kept thinking of while you were talking is someone that's been in commercial acting classes, but the one thing they stressed above all else, and this is true for people without any acting training, if you think you're not doing enough, you're probably doing just enough.
Yeah.
That way, that will keep you from being it's a toaster, that kind of stuff like that. And it's way easier to do that than you might think, even when it's your friend's phone on you. If you haven't done it, you have no idea how seeing that light makes you all of a sudden, Hugh Jackman's character from The Greatest Show on Earth. Like these things just happen, and it's you wouldn't believe. But what Noel said is so true about that. It might feel good in the time, but in the end, it's ultimately going to be a detriment to your project and turn people off.
I think the not having a call to action is one of the big
Mm,
mistakes you can make.
yes.
Period. Like if you're not, that's really should be the jewel in the crown of your video is that
Mhm.
call to action and motivating that next step, because there's, there you can be making something for entertainment, but most people who are making stuff listening to this podcast, I would assume, are trying to sell something or trying to market.
Yes.
So you want to, have that call to action to motivate people to take the next step, to click to your website and, be very active. I think that things like, visit us online today, as much as I do use it, can be
Hmm.
overused. I
Hmm.
think something like, start taking control of your life today, such and such
Hmm.
is the bad example of it. But something similar,
Yes.
put people in a position where they believe they're in control.
Hmm. Hmm. And I'll piggyback on that, and that does the opposite of when you're trying to sell someone something, because it's not that you're selling them, you're directing them to the next course of action. You're pointing them towards it, and how they're still in control of it. It's not you just saying do it. It's no, this is for you, and you're gonna like it. Like it may sound synonymous, but it's not. It's a very important delineation there.
Absolutely. I think the final other mistake that I see a lot, in a few different ways, is pacing. Um,
Mm.
and that's something that absolutely comes with time and comes with practicing and making things. But a few things right off the bat, I feel like a shot should never be longer than 10 seconds. If you're really
Hey, there
out
we go.
here for a long time, you're going to bore people. People's attention spans are so short these days. Like that's the biggest
Yes.
thing to remember. If you can say, what you're saying in 20 words, if you can say it in 3, do that. And
Hmm.
they say start late and early. You know,
Yes.
we don't need to sit here and really, have an introduction to all of this. No, we are, hey, you have to have it, and that's when it comes down to, this could be when you're doing or jotting your stuff down, your beats. It's like, hey, we have your attention. Look at us. This is what we do. This is the stuff in action and why you should buy it. And here's where you should go. The end.
Yep.
And the more you
Good night.
talk,
Hmm.
I think the other thing is the more you run the risk of people not liking you. Because if you're not,
Hmm.
that's the other part, is if you're not used to being on camera, if you're not, it's if you keep moving and you keep on your toes, there's not enough time for people to settle in to start asking too many questions.
Right. Right. I 100%. I'd even piggyback on top of that as a man when it's, you might have heard Noel say, it's don't have a shot longer than 10 seconds. So that's not very long. Yes, it is.
Yes.
10 seconds on video is interminably long. It'll be at 10 seconds is like a month and a half. You'll be sitting there. You have no, I mean, if you haven't done it before, it is like some kind, it's one of those things like when someone's trapped in infinity in a movie and like the horizon goes beyond them. It's that kind of thing. Like, so yeah, so 10 seconds or less is absolute less. Err on the side of less. That is very much the key to that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I keep going back to, if you got 5 words, say it in 3. If you got 10 seconds, like cut that down to like a third. And the other thing is, I'll never say it enough, peer review, pass somebody, and, do an edit. Because, the other thing is, when you're directing films, they always say you have to, kill your darlings. Like when you're working in
Oh yes.
for a long time. Or writing too. You tend to get attached to things that, might have a lot of meaning for you. That shot might be 10 seconds long because you really like it. But then when you show it to literally anyone else, they're sitting here with thumbs, and you got it, and show it to the right people who are going to say, that's great, but that could have been half as long, or I like that. Maybe if you split that up and put it in different places, that's going to help, because that's the best way you're going to get the indication as to whether or not the consumer is going to want to click away. If you are showing your best friend, they don't even need to talk. If they're starting to fidget,
Right. That's exactly right. No. That it's yeah. There are things that, and even then, if you're writing something and all that, like she said, if you write it and it seems like a brilliant idea at night, look at it again in the morning. After that first night, that's that. Because when she mentions peer review, that peer could be you with your coffee and breakfast. Like it's there's nothing wrong with looking at it a second time, particularly if you're going to be involving other folks in a shoot and the kind of responsibility and time and commitment all that takes. It's a lot easier to change words than it is to change shots. So if you're going to write it ahead of time, key in on that too.
That might be a great way to close out. Is the biggest mistake I think people could possibly make is not getting feedback.
Oh yeah.
No,
that's right.
It, but you have to.
And to make sure to get that feedback at a time where it can still be utilized, like before it's too late. Not just like do the thing and be like, hey, what do you think? It stinks. Oh well, that was 50 grand. Like do it early, when there's still time for changes can occur. And,
at every moment, like when you're doing your little comic book storyboard, show it to, who are you sitting with? Hey, does this make sense? If I'm trying to tell this story, I was looking at one before. It's like, shot of the dog, shot of the door, shot of the dog, shot of his owner. You could tell the dog wants to go for a walk, kind of thing,
Yeah.
So
okay.
Line up your stuff before you even shoot anything, and get that feedback, or your moments, or your beats. It's like, hey, I want to start with this, like talking about hooking people at every step. It can be so scary when you first start because you're afraid of being embarrassed or that it's bad. And the first thing to remember is that, it's you're only going to get better from that feedback.
And even, not to put too much of a brutal take on it, but okay, whatever slight embarrassment you might feel at the beginning is infinitely better than the embarrassment you might feel for having a mediocre project or one that doesn't end up meeting your ultimate expectations.
And the other thing too is, I think, I don't know, similar but different, just to bounce off of that, the other mistake is to like make a couple of these and then stop, or like, you make that sucks and you hate it. I think you make something, like if you have done this thing, you've made your first video, made first 5 videos, by the 8th video, you're still like, this sucks. There's 2 sides to that, and it's the up and the down. Yet the downside is, yes, you're not yet at that skill level that you're creating the kind of content you would want to see produced from your brand. The really awesome part of this is that your stuff sucks. If you
Right.
know your stuff sucks by the 8th one, that means that you don't have any taste and you can't teach that, you know? So I think it's
It's so
tremendous
true.
because it speaks to what you can celebrate about that. And with anytime you do something new, you know, like you start playing guitar and you learn like your 10th song, and you're like, this sucks. It's like, yes, because you've been listening to Eric Clapton and you know what a
Right.
good guitarist sounds like.
You
So if you take
understand where the
what you're
standard
making,
is.
yeah. I had to give Van Halen a rest because I keep invoking his name.
Well, that's
But
fine.
but it's true, you know, and anything you do, and then you want to stop. But what I would say is in that moment, celebrate the fact that you have taste and you know what a good video looks like, and you can't teach that. So if you know what a good video looks like, it's just a matter of stretching those muscles every time. You know, if you give up after the 10th one because it sucks, you're giving up on the good part of this, which is that you do have that eye, you have that taste. You just have to get to a point where your skill level matches your taste level, and it takes time, but it's absolutely worth it.
That's so great. And what a lovely closing sentiment. It is absolutely worth it. Everything that you said really is. Thank you for coming to share that with us. That's tremendous.
Thank you for having me on, Greg.
Always, always. Well, once again, on behalf of Website Depot, my name is Greg Benevent. Take it easy. Have a good night.